Hey guys, I am excited to introduce a new series that we're doing for youth, and it's over Moses. Moses, if you haven't heard of him, is a very important guy in the Bible. To understand who Moses is, we have to understand that he is a chosen leader in the biblical world, and especially with early Israelites and early Jews. His story in the Bible and his journey with God is a test of real faith. His trust in God must be complete. With the position that he's in, it requires all of Moses. And the beautiful thing about this is we see Moses' relationship with God grow. And with that, we see prospering and leadership and amazing things happen that only God could do. So let me give you some background on what's happening. Before Moses is even born, his people, the Israelites, have been enslaved by the Egyptians for over 400 years. Egypt's leader, their king, is named Pharaoh. Under Pharaoh's leadership, the Israelites begin to grow. And the more they grow, the more slaves that Pharaoh has. Eventually, this becomes a problem for Pharaoh because he sees not a nation that is going to be workers for him, but now he sees that they are beginning to be a threat. See, the more they have of them, the more likely they are to rebel. And Pharaoh doesn't want that to happen. Let me just say this from the beginning. Pharaoh is not a good guy. And his solution to get rid of some of the Israelites is this right here. He simply wants to take out the newest generation. That means killing newborn babies. I told you, he is not a good guy. And in this darkness is where we find our chosen hero of the story, Moses. Turn with me to Exodus chapter 2, and we'll start in verse 1. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the Nile. Remember that Moses' mom is faced with letting her baby boy be killed by Egyptians or sending him across the Nile. She's backed into a corner and she doesn't have a lot of options, so we can't judge her when she feels like this is the only thing that she can do. But instead of complaining or instead of worrying, what she does is she simply puts her trust in God. She puts her newborn baby boy into a basket and floats him down the river. Luckily, this isn't where it ends. Let's continue in verse 4. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking towards the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. There are just too many coincidences, too many good things that have happened to Moses right now for it just to be considered an accident that this is happening. No, God is in control, and he has been in control the entire time. I don't know if you guys noticed it or missed it, but Moses' older sister is following him as he floats down the river. Now, I don't know if she's just worried or just has to see what happens to Moses, but she follows him and she sees all this happen. She must have been scared, but at one point, she must have seen that God was in control because of all these crazy, miraculous things that had just happened. Let's continue in verse 7. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." So we thought God was doing some cool things before, but it gets even better. Moses is taken into Pharaoh's kingdom through his daughter. He becomes Pharaoh's grandchild. That's what happened here. Because of that, Moses is now safe, even though he's a Hebrew, essentially the enemy of Egypt. And here's the next cool thing. Remember when Moses' mom put her trust and faith in God? Well, it's almost immediately rewarded here. Because not only is her boy safe, not only will he be raised as a prince now, but she also gets to raise her own son as a sort of nanny for him. And on top of all that, she gets to be paid to do this. Remember that she's a slave and Pharaoh doesn't pay these people. She gets to raise her own son in a safe environment without him ever having any sort of harm come to him, and she gets paid for it. It's just unbelievable the control that God had in the situation. Moses grows up in Pharaoh's court, and he's a voice for his people. He's an advocate for the Israelites who were still enslaved. Now, this is only the beginning of Moses. His journey with God has only just started. Moses has not done anything spectacular yet, but God will have something even bigger for him planned. And just like his mother, when he goes through this journey with God, he's going to have to put all of his faith and all of his trust in the Lord. So for this week, we have to pause our story. Next week, we'll pick up with Moses as an adult, and his journey only becomes cooler. So to wrap up this week, let's take away 3 lessons. And the first lesson is that when we trust in God, He brings good outcomes. Now, we don't always know what that outcome will be. Moses' mother probably didn't think that her baby boy, would be raised in Pharaoh's court. She probably had no idea what would happen. But what is obvious is that when she put her faith in God, something good happened, according to His plan and not our own. The second part is that our trust must continue and continue and continue. This means that when something scary happens, we have to carry on that faith. I believe that Moses' sister was the one to carry on this faith. She wouldn't have followed her baby brother if she knew that he was in real danger. She could have seen him die or get hurt in a horrible, horrible way. But she followed him. And I believe that she knew that Moses would be okay. When we come to a challenge, when we come to a hard time, we have to put our trust in God and continue with that trust. Here's the kicker. Trust does not equal comfort. Yes, God teaches us that loving Him, obeying Him, putting our trust in Him will bring peace. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to be comfortable with what God has for you. And in this next week, you'll see exactly what I mean. Because the journey that God takes Moses on is nothing but uncomfortable. Yet, we can still rely on who God is and trust in His plan. Because what He has for us is good. And in fact, it's better than anything that we can, as humans, as people, can come up with ourselves. So, take those 3 things. Trust in the Lord. Continue your trust. And don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. God still has you. God still got you. And I'll see you next week.